Good afternoon. I'm so honored to be here today. I have to start off with a personal comment. My first introduction to IMI was in 2009 when I was at Pfizer. I had the pleasure and honor of working with Will Sporen, who's here today, to help develop the EU AIMS Autism IMI project, which is now the largest funded project for autism. And it made me tremendously passionate of the value of public-private partnerships, and I moved to Tucson, Arizona to join the Critical Path Institute, where I have the honor to lead Coalition Against Major Diseases to, again, invigorate my passion and those of all of you who work with us for public-private partnerships. So today I'm going to talk to you about the Coalition Against Major Diseases, and the speakers preceding me did a fabulous job of explaining the daunting challenges we face in Alzheimer's disease. The number of failed drugs is unacceptable to patients, families, caregivers. We have to find a better way, and the recent costly negative trial results are all facing us with the reality that one organization, one government, one agency is not enough. We have to work together. We have to understand the causes and the reasons for these failures. What is it about efficacy? Why are there safety issues? We know this is an elderly population. We have to learn from the failures. We haven't done that sufficiently enough. And today I'm going to tell you about how CAMD has gone about this. And yesterday I had the honor to join forces with two other IMI Alzheimer's consortia and talk together about we all have to do this together. So what is the solution to this problem? We just heard this morning about how this is just being realized, the value proposition. What is the return on investment and the gain? The gain is in working together, sharing knowledge. The gain is learning from our failures and how we can enable the success of these public-private partnerships. Because without the resources to work together in these alliances, our own success is challenged for the future. I want to acknowledge the instrumental leadership of those involved many years ago in the Alzheimer's Disease Neuroimaging Initiative. This is truly the flagship public-private partnership that led the way. And at the time this initiative was being put together, people honestly did not realize what tremendous advances in our understanding of this disease would occur. And based on ADNI and many of the examples we've heard about today, NeuroMed and others, we know now that this disease starts 10 to 20 years in the brain before symptom onset. We have to understand how to target this disease very early to successfully intervene at a time before the pathology is so advanced that no drug has hope. At CAMD, I have the pleasure of working collaboratively with ADNI investigators, with NeuroMed investigators, with government, with patient advocacy groups, to collectively work together to advance novel drug development tools for the treatment of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Dr. Buckman did a terrific job today talking about the FDA's recognition of the value of drug development tools dating back to the Critical Path Initiative, and we're so fortunate also to work with Maria Isaac and the EMA in their recognition of the value of drug development tools and accelerating drug development for any drug candidate independent of its mechanism of action to treat this patient population. CAMD has achieved tremendous success over a relatively short period of time. This includes the development and final publication of the first therapeutic area CDISC standards. CDISC is another nonprofit organization, Clinical Data Interchange Consortium, that has in their remit and mission advancement of globally recognized data standards for accelerating review through the regulatory path. This CDISC standard was utilized to pool data from many different clinical trials, the placebo arms of these data, to create a unified database so that we can learn from these studies that have not been successful to make it to patients. And then that was used to create the first ever mathematical modeling tool, drug disease trial model, advanced now for a regulatory decision. This is the first, and we're very enthusiastic about the outcome of this initiative. And then we've also been fortunate through our alliances with EMA to achieve qualification of hippocampal volume as a measurement tool to enrich clinical trials at a time in which clinical diagnostic criteria alone is uncertain, and in which the biomarker can help define those patients that have the pathology for Alzheimer's disease. So this consortium is very multidisciplinary in nature. We have many different pharmaceutical companies. We're fortunate to work with our government agencies, FDA, FNIH, NIA, and our FDA and EMA colleagues are part of our teams, and they help advance our teams forward in our progress for success. We're also so fortunate to work with numerous patient advocacy organizations. On today's call, I want to personally thank and acknowledge Maria Carrillo for her leadership, and you'll see some examples of how our alliances with the Alzheimer's Association have been so pivotal. Not listed here are numerous academic key experts and opinion leaders who work with us and our teams to share the common goal of advancing these qualified tools for regulatory use. We also work with diagnostic companies, contract research organizations, and I also want to highlight in this slide what's not clear is this is not US-based. Our outreach and our members are global. And many of you are here that work with CAMD. So I'll just highlight just very briefly what these accomplishments that I mentioned is. These CETA standards are, as I said, recognized internationally, and there's been tremendous interest and initiatives that have become underway in the past year of how CETA standards can be accelerate drug development. Chavray explained so kindly today about how in the agency review, one of the challenges, the acceptance and collection of data in a single unified data standard. Therapeutic-specific standards will accelerate each disease area that's being submitted by a company will have a benefit under the regulatory review because they don't have to take all the time to go in and standardize a number of these different measures. We now have funding from the FDA to develop new version 1.1 of AD standards that's focused on biomarkers and different cognitive measures for earlier patient populations. And now there's an initiative to develop therapeutic standards across different disease areas. What was done was to take distinct sources of data across many different clinical trials that now number 6,500 patients in number, to integrate and pool it from 9 different companies who actually spent a tremendous amount of their own resources to remap and pool data to this common CDISC Alzheimer's standard from 24 different clinical trials. These studies would have been disparate and individual in nature without the remapping. It would not have been possible to do what we did with this data, which was to develop this mathematical modeling and simulation tool. The other thing that was unique in this initiative was at the onset of the decision to put the resources into this database, it was decided early on and with tremendous attention to confidentiality, de-anonymizing data, and privacy with creating this database to any qualified researcher around the world to be able to go in and ask their own research questions with this valuable source of data. So what was done through this initiative was to take these distinct, disparate data sets across different companies, remap and pool that to this common CDISC standards, and then have that single unified database provide the substrate to build a mathematical modeling and simulation tool that actually describes, with this database, integrating data from ADNI on the longitudinal progression and the literature data on drug response, a mathematical model that describes the progression, the placebo effect, the dropout, and other components of the disease that had not been recognized previously. I'm going to just change gears just for a second and talk about biomarkers. We've heard today so much of the tremendous value of biomarkers. What has been the case in Alzheimer's for many years is that biomarkers have been implemented at multiple phases of drug development to help enable decisions around, is the drug hitting its target? How can we use the biomarker for decision making? But the big gap was just highlighted with the question just preceding me, is that we don't clearly yet understand how the biomarkers track with the decline in cognition. That's one of the key goals of we heard today of EMIF, is to discover these novel biomarkers. And CAMD has been actively working through the regulatory path to implement biomarkers that have been studied for many years and have a lot of validity in terms of their underpinnings and knowledge around how they link to the pathophysiology to disease. And in the diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment, it's very clear that there's uncertainty in the diagnosis of these patients. So implementation of the biomarker to choose the patients for clinical trials is a really excellent approach to enriching the population to make sure that you're targeting and treating the patients that have the disease with a novel agent. So in this approach, we've been successful with Maria Isaac and her team in qualifying for use with the EMA, that use of baseline hippocampal volume as an enrichment tool for clinical trials in mild cognitive impairment. And we have active program underway now with the FDA to successfully achieve qualification as well. I just have a couple of more slides. This slide highlights our extensive network. We've very work in an integrative network to avoid duplication of effort, synergize our work with other public-private partnerships, and that's why we're here today and had a terrific venue yesterday to talk about expanding our alliances with IMI to improve our synergies, learnings, and this slide, which Martha showed earlier today, the challenges, because everyone in this space of public-private partnerships continues to deal with challenges with resources. How do we share data? How do we learn from each other? And one of the most exciting things that came from yesterday is an idea to say we all need to collectively work together to try to increase the number of biomarkers from clinical trials that will help us all succeed in learning from these failures. So with that, I'm going to pause, and this is a series of questions that we have for the panel forum, and see if there's any questions.